Victorian Periodical Parade. Hello, and welcome to Episode 2 of Season 3 of the Victorian Periodical Parade. Again, we are reading from Our Lady of Hate, the short stories of Catherine Lord, which was edited by Johnny Mains. Today, we shall be reading the curious story of Susan Styles, a psychical romance, published in the Ludgate, March of 1893. Susan Styles. The name is not a romantic one, and yet it is associated in my mind with a curious series of incidents which, were I a member of the Psychical or Ghost Investigating Society, I might have brought under the notice of that body. I first heard of Susan Styles some 2 years ago. My wife and I had just taken up our abode in a house in a country town, attracted there by the existence of a good and cheap grammar school, a very sufficient inducement to the parents of 5 boys whose education had to be provided for on a small income. We had just settled ourselves into our new home, fresh with all the glories of new paint and paper, and were expecting calls from the neighbour. Hence I was rather annoyed to find the name which gives the title to my narrative scribbled on the spotless surface of our dining-room wainscot. "My dear," I remarked to my wife, pointing to the offending inscription, "these boys must really learn to respect some room in the house. They have their private den in which to execute any mischief they desire, and I cannot have every wainscot in the house defaced by their scribble."
"I suppose it was poor Bobby,"
said his mother.
"He always has a pencil in hand, dear little fellow. I often think he will be a great artist one day."
I shall rejoice to see the results of Bobby's pencil on the walls of the Royal Academy, but I cannot admire them on my new paint, I answered sternly, for with 5 sons one has to be firm on the question of wilful damage to the property, and I knew my wife to be a weak ally against the boys. I carefully effaced the name and the subject dropped, but 2 days afterward Susan Styles was again scribbled on another part of the room, and this time I remonstrated more strongly.
"It is not the boys," retorted my wife. "You are always so ready to blame the poor fellows. I asked Bobby the other day, and he said he didn't know anything about the writing."
I believe all my sons to be truthful lads as boys go. But does the most honest schoolboy readily plead guilty to an act of mischief? Besides, as Bobby is eternally scribbling everywhere, might he not be honestly oblivious of some acts of his vagrant pencil?
"I dare say it was the new housemaid. She is a stupid sort of girl," added my wife.
"Had the name been John or Will Styles, I could have better understood it," I remarked. "But a girl of that sort would hardly have the name of another woman so constantly in her thoughts that she was obliged to scribble it everywhere."
"Well, I am sure the poor boys had nothing to do with it,"
was my wife's Parthian shot as I left the room.
"Look here, James,"
cried my helpmate a few hours later. "Even you will allow the boys could hardly have written the name here," as she pointed triumphantly to the corner of the ceiling where, in the same faint, apparently penciled characters, was visible Susan Styles again.
"Only a ladder could reach up there, and we have not such a thing in the house."
"I suppose it was done by one of the painters in love with the Susan Styles," I remarked, "but I wish he had chosen some other place for his inscriptions than our walls and ceilings. It is so odd, too, that I never observed the writing before."
"Oh, you always notice things when you are out of sorts," said my wife with an air of conviction. "Whenever you begin grumbling, I always know you are due for a fit of the gout."
The occurrence passed out of mind as the days went by, and though I occasionally noted the persistent Susan Styles scrawled faintly on some place on the wainscot, I contented myself with rubbing off the inscription, supposing that I had overlooked it before. We had moved into our house in the dark, cold days, and the spring sunshine doubtless showed every nook and corner more clearly. Some months later I was obliged to go to London on business, and was glad to accept the friendly offer of a bed for a night or two from an old college chum, who had recently married a widow of considerable means, a trifle older than himself, but the soul of good nature, as fat and elderly folks so often are. I was but slightly acquainted with Miss Wilson. Still, she received me with the utmost cordiality.
"And we've a treat for you tonight, Mr. Harper," she added. "Miss Jones is coming to us."
I endeavoured to look properly elated at this intelligence, but as Miss Jones was a total stranger to me, the announcement conveyed little information. Wilson perceived my embarrassment and proceeded to exclaim,
"Miss Jones was a great personage in what may be called spiritualistic circles, and she was a professional medium, and like Owen Glendower undertook to summon spirits from the vasty deep, or anywhere else."
I found that my hostess was a sincere believer in table-turning, spirit-rapping, and the like, and that Wilson, for very obvious reasons, found it best to abstain from open ridicule of her fancies.
"Most women have some silly fad,"
he remarked to me after dinner,
"and my wife's is a very harmless one after all. It pleases her, and doesn't annoy me."
When I remembered Wilson's very struggling existence before he married his wife, and glanced around me at the luxuriously furnished apartment, and sipped the choice old port, I felt that silence regarding the miracles of spiritualist was not, perhaps, an overwhelming price to pay for such comforts. For myself, I may say that I have the profoundest disbelief in mediums. I have attended more than one séance, at which the spirits of the great and talented of the earth have been supposed to rap out replies. I have noted on such occasions how sadly mental gifts deteriorated in another world. The shade of Lord Byron had been credited with balderdash, which would disgrace a bellman, while Scott and Addison appear to have forgotten not only their graces of style, but even the humbler art of spelling their native language, to judge by the replies they dictated through their mediums. Therefore I attended Miss Jones's séance with languid interest, more especially as I perceived that the lady in question much resembled others of her profession whom I previously met, an example that the spirits were not particular regarding the rank and education of the persons they selected as messengers. A crowd of devout believers had gathered in Miss Wilson's drawing-room, receiving ambiguously and somewhat ungrammatically worded messages with profound admiration. Wilson had slipped away, but I was obliged to remain out of politeness to my hostess.
"Now, Mr. Harper, you must ask a question," cried that lady. "I believe you are as bad as Richard, and think it is all imposture."
I felt a guilty thrill, for the accusation was all too true, and to disguise my embarrassment answered, "I should be most happy to do so, Miss Wilson, but I really don't know what to say."
"Oh, ask to communicate with some deceased friend or relative,"
said a young lady near me, who had just been on rapport with the spirit of a dead sister. I felt a sensation of disgust at the suggestion. I have lost loved ones like other middle-aged people, but to profane their dear and sacred names by uttering them in an assemblage of strangers, to submit my most holy and cherished memories to the common gaze, never, never. Even were it true that the vulgar woman could bring me a message from the dead, would it not seem profaned by passing through such lips? I had even too much reverence for my favourite authors to pretend to call them up, and hesitated a moment.
"Oh, do say something,"
implored Miss Wilson. A name flashed upon me. Well, I said I should like to communicate with Susan Styles.
Victorian Periodical Parade.
Welcome to the ad break on Victorian Periodical Parade. Here we're going to be discussing Anchor. Have you heard about Anchor? That is what we are using to host our podcast. It is the easiest way to make a podcast. It is free at the base level. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. Another beautiful and easy feature is that Anchor will distribute your podcast for you in such a way that it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and any other podcatcher that you are currently using. You can get paid for turning your hobby into a podcast, and there is no minimum listenership. Everything required to make a podcast is located on one simple website. And now, dear listeners, if you are interested in creating a podcast, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. You can further support us by clicking on the link in the feed below. Thank you, and enjoy listening to the Victorian Periodical Parade on Anchor Podcasts. Good day.
Victorian Periodical Parade.
Even the medium started at the loud and emphatic rap with which the lady proclaimed her presence and willingness to answer questions, and my own interest was suddenly awakened. I do not expect anyone to believe the narrative that follows. I hardly think I believe it myself. Anyway, were it a coincidence or chance, the result was singular. It took time to arrive at the history of Susan Styles, as spelled out by means of knocks on the table. But I was now as eager a listener as the rest of the company. It was a very old story of sin and sorrow. An unwedded mother, a little life sacrificed to save the parents' reputation.
"No one ever knew he was born or that I killed him,"
said the guilty shade.
"but I buried him under the drawing-room floor."
That was all we could extract. The spirit reproachfully said she had tried to communicate before. Then came silence, and the medium announced that the séance was concluded for the evening. I was now plied with eager questions. Who was this Susan Styles? Had I known her? Had I ever seen her? I may remark that the spirit had been sparing in its communications, merely answering to its name, and stating its crime as explaining the reason of its desire to communicate with us. I had no mind to discuss the matter with Miss Wilson and her friends, so contented myself with replying that Susan Styles was a total stranger to me, but that the name had caught my memory, and I mentioned it as the first that came into my head. When I next saw Wilson alone, however, I told him all the circumstances.
"Curious, very curious,"
he remarked.
"I think in your place I would have a look under the flooring."
This was exactly what I was longing that someone should suggest to me, though I was ashamed to propose it myself. Few of us like to acknowledge that we are setting out on a ghost hunt. I felt so ashamed of my own credulity that I determined to wait for a week, when my wife and family would be away at the seaside, and then to prosecute my explorations secretly under the cover of general house-cleaning. I had long promised my wife to erect a little conservatory outside the drawing-room window, and determined to make this pretense for engaging the services of a carpenter. All was quietly arranged. I made an excuse to slip back from the seaside just to see how the workmen were getting on at home, and met Wilson, who was curious enough to come down from town to assist at my investigations. As we walked together from the station, I began to think what a pair of fools we were. Talk of superstition and credulity. I should be ashamed to laugh at the nursery maid who believed in a dream book. I was thankful that I said nothing about my expedition, even to my wife. The one thing that inclined me to prosecute further investigations was that I had discovered that Susan was, or had been, a real personage. I had made cautious inquiries in the neighbourhood, and discovered that some years previously a young woman of that name had been in service with the family who had formerly occupied my house, that she had been left in charge of the premises during their absence for some 6 months, and been dismissed on their return, after which she abruptly left the town, As regards her character, it was difficult to gain authentic information, but the baker's wife said
she was flighty and a giddy lass.
And the butcher's wife remarked darkly,
"Yes, I had known Susan once, but the girl got herself talked about latterly."
All this was somewhat corroborative evidence of the story told in Miss Wilson's drawing-room. We found the house exactly as we had hoped, both servants out, a deaf old aunt, one of them, in charge of the premises, our old carpenter languidly at work in the greenhouse. The old woman readily admitted us. She would have done the same to a burglar, and the old carpenter was only too pleased to leave his work on any pretext. I made up some story of doubtful drains and a desire to investigate under the flooring, and the carpenter readily undertook to remove the planks in the drawing-room. Wilson and I watched with an eagerness of which we were secretly ashamed, but to our utter disgust and humiliation nothing was discovered. Dust and emptiness, but no sign of a tiny form once hurried away to avoid detection of a crime.
"I always thought it was stuff,"
observed Wilson, very unjustly, for had he not believed enough to come a railway journey to investigate the matter? Of course, we had not taken the carpenter into our confidence, and the man sat placidly on his heels, remarking that "I never thought a strange ran under this room, nor under the drawing-room neither, for that matter." "This is the drawing-room," I said.
"Well, sir, I was a-speaking of the house as it used to be when I worked here in Captain Hardy's time. The room across the passage was a drawing-room then. They was a large family and took this room, being bigger, for their dining-room." "You have just reversed the case,"
said Wilson.
"Your dining-room was their drawing-room."
An idea struck me. We were examining the wrong room. I now remembered all the scribbling had been on the dining-room walls. "Come in here. This is where the bad drains are," I said, hurriedly to the workmen. In a few minutes the dining-room planking was being taken up, and here, hidden in a corner of the room, under a plank that bore traces of having been disturbed, we found a little box. I need not detail all that followed. The police were called in and the remains of the infant discovered. Neither Wilson nor I saw fit to give the reasons for our examinations of the flooring, and the discovery of the box passes as an accidental occurrence in the search for defective pipes. But the investigation that follows clearly established a strong case of suspicion against Susan Stiles as the mother and the murderess. She had had ample time in 6 months' sole occupation of the house to conceal the remains of her victim, and her dismissal on the return of her employers was chiefly owing to the unfavourable rumours they had received regarding her conduct. No trace of her could be found. I, for my reasons, believed her to be dead. We never found any scribbling on the walls after. The poor little remains had been decently interred. I told my wife the curious circumstance which induced me to make the discovery, but I grieve to say she only smiled at my supernatural explanation of them. The inscriptions on our walls were, in her judgment, clearly traceable to some former lover of the mysterious Susan Stiles, on whom his thoughts had run while painting and whitewashing. As for the séance at Miss Wilson's, my wife believed the story to be a pure invention in the part of the medium, desirous of attracting interest by a sensational tale. The verification of the tale by the discovery was a mere chance coincidence. All this may be true. Most likely it is. I am no believer in mediums or ghostly appearances. Still, the whole story is a curious one, and might interest inquirers into spiritualistic communications. Wilson and I have certainly kept the tale from reaching the ears of his wife. We feel that she would score it as a victory. Notes. The Society for the Psychical Research was formed in 1882, 11 years before this story was written.
Victorian Periodical Parade.
That was The Curious Story of Susan Styles, a psychical romance, published in the Ludgate, March 1893. Written by Catherine Lord. Edited by Johnny Mains. Narrated by Owen Curtis. Produced for the Victorian Periodical Parade, Season 3, Episode 2. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to check in to the second half of Episode 2, where Dr. Kari Nixon analyzes and breaks down this story for the modern-day listener. Oh, you're in for a good one. Leave your comments and reviews on podchaser.com at the Victorian Periodical Parade or on Facebook/Victorian Parade. Thanks. Have a great day.
Victorian Periodical Parade. Victorian Periodical Parade.
Ugh.
So
weird only working on one screen.
Oh, yeah. I can't ever go back to one screen. Have you ever seen this Onion article? I always think of this one.
Coworker with 2 computer screens, not f***ing around.
It's just about like how super serious of a worker he is because he has 2 computers. And like the day that I got to, and now I like can't ever go back to just one mere computer screen.
Oh, it's insane.
I'm like, oh my God, I'm like bougie like that guy that they're making fun of. But okay, so I mentioned I feel terrible, but I think I told you that I was driving to and from Seattle all day Wednesday. There's a treatment that I've had for a chronic, not serious, but very uncomfortable condition that I have. And I've had a treatment, but you have to go into this, and it works for me perfectly, but you have to go into a doctor's office like once a week for 12 weeks. And then every month just indefinitely. And they're testing and trying to get FDA approval for a device that they just implant. And they implant it like in your ankle. And then you can just do that treatment whenever you need it. Wow. So I got approved, or I'm trying to get into that study. And one step was going over to Seattle where they are and doing some stuff. But now I have to do like a 7-day diary where I track several things. And one major thing that I have to track is how much water I'm drinking every day. And so now I present to you this internet meme. Why do I feel so terrible? Coffee is not a meal. Eat a vegetable. Sleep. Guess we'll never know. Which is exactly why I feel awful tonight.
Yeah.
There's an iteration of that where they also say, like, drink some water. And I can tell you with confidence, because I've had to be tracking my water intake, that I've had like 20 ounces of water today. And it's 100% why I'm like sitting here on the couch like a baby, like my head hurts and I feel really tired. Like it's all because I need to drink some water. So
yeah. Oh, hey, look, there you go.
I feel like I drank water really well before the pandemic. Like I almost maybe drink too much water, but at my office, I just have this huge cup and I carry it around. And for whatever unclear psychological reasons, I just don't do that at my house. And so I just have trouble noticing that I'm not drinking water.
It's a weird difference. Yeah. You get home and you're like, I can be comfy and I can relax and I can be kind of, lazy and not do the things that at work I have to be in my prime. So I have to like make sure I'm hydrated, make sure I've got my coffee and do all these regular things. I
feel like you're just, you're more like scheduled or something when you're at work. Plus also like, let's be real, like they have to pay you to be at your job. So, there are moments where you're bored with whatever you're doing and getting up to fill your water. It kind of, there's an incentive. Whereas when I'm at home and I'm like, in my comfy bed with my pets all around me. Like
it's like, darn, my water's empty. What?
Like, humans are so ridiculous. Like, why do we kill ourselves this way?
Right. I saw a thing about that as well, about humans are made to do what's comfortable and safe. And like working out is supposed to be uncomfortable because you're trying to make yourself better. And so like all these uncomfortable things we humans fight hard against, because throughout our entire existence, it's been stay away from the uncomfortable situations because you might die.
Well, and yeah, like you don't want to lose like really important calories that you don't know when you'll get food again,
Right.
so stay there.
Yes, stay, be calm, just go to sleep, because tomorrow morning, once it's bright out, it'll be much safer to go to the watering hole.
We've like out-evolved ourselves.
Yes.
Because like now, because like before, it's like it was guaranteed that you were going to be like walking around all the time trying to find a lion to eat or whatever.
Right.
So you're getting your cardio.
Yeah.
Or running away from the lion.
Right.
Yeah. So we're like built to be like, save your calories, chill out when you can, eat the highest fat, highest sugar things you can find to keep going. And now it's like, this is actually what's going to kill us all. It's not going to be the robot apocalypse. It's just that we're all going to like lay in bed forever, which feels like where my life is going. Let me go fill up my water real quick, and then we can get down to business.
Sounds good.
Oh, hey, I accidentally talked all about myself. How is your family? How was your day with the kids?
The day was pretty good. Fiona and Philip both wanted face paint, and I started painting Philip. After Philip got done with his face paint, I was like, okay, Fiona, your turn. And she was like, nah, because she started playing with Duplos or Legos or something, and I was like, okay. And I was like, well, the face paint's out, so I might as well paint my face too. So I did that, and that was fun.
How sick did Ebet get? I'm so scared. My second shot is on Wednesday. And if you cannot tell by this conversation, listeners and Owen, Owen probably already knows it anyway, but like, I do not cope well with moderate discomfort. It's just like, I am such a baby. And so like, I know it's just going to be like a day, and I know it's just going to be like a fever, but I don't handle any little thing very well. I'm so scared.
It was weird because like we had heard other stories that were like, yeah, it was fine. So we were thinking, okay, it'll be fine. And then Thursday night, she just was having all the chills and all the hot to cold ratios and stuff. And she was sore all over. So super tender. So it's not good. She's
coming
super tired
for me
all day. Yeah.
I do not think words can express to you what a baby I am. I am so scared. Oh my gosh. Because like you guys are like tough Midwestern stock. Like, y'all are tough, and I just don't like being uncomfortable.
It is true. Yes. I've always thought that Elizabeth is, a strong, independent woman. But then, you watch this and it's like, holy mackerel, this must be bad.
I know. That's what I'm saying. And like, I am not of your kind.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm just like.
Like, I really can't express to you. Like, there's not a really way to talk about something subjective like that. But like, I had a little cold like a couple months ago, and it did end up becoming like a sinus infection, but it really was a mild cold. Like, it didn't come with a cough. You know how some colds, like they get real bad and your face hurts from none of that. Huh. I got like a little bit of that soreness you get in the back of your throat when you're getting a cold, just from the drainage, not from like a sore throat, and some stuffiness. And like, I felt sick, but none of the really bad symptoms. And I just moped for days. I would just like throw myself like I was on a Victorian fainting couch. Like, oh my God, and I know this one is bad because I see people that I acknowledge are tough cookies. And I'm like, I'm not just going to die. My whole family is going to die because I'm going to take them down with me in like a vortex of my melodrama. Like, it's not going to be good.
Ugh, that's unfortunate.
Okay, so I want to dive in. I'm really excited about this story.
Beautiful.
Okay, and I'm going to be like a total punk and like sign off the second we're done because, as I have mentioned, I'm moderately dehydrated and I cannot exist right now. Do you can you just look at this and understand how bad off I'm going to be with the second dose if Elsabet was feeling...
like you said, yes, I do know you rather well, and I can definitely see that it'll be a big deal.
But so much of it is cycle. I mean, I know that, objectively people get pretty sick, like Elsabet, but I'm wondering, there's like a tiny grain of hope in myself that I have,
Right.
which is that I think, as I've said, I'm very melodramatic about it. So perhaps a lot of my reactions are, I don't know, like a sense that I shouldn't have to feel that way, or like I had stuff to do and I don't want to feel this way right now. So knowing that it's coming and essentially planning to take the day off and just be sick, like maybe I'll just accept it and sleep,
Right. And that's exactly what like Elizabeth and I both had in mind ahead of time. We were like, well, let's just make sure that you get the shot on Thursday or Friday, and then you can deal with whatever comes over the weekend. And, the whole time I was like, okay, it's like likely that I'm going to have to take Friday off because the second one is such a terror for our age and especially females. And it's like,
okay. Is that true?
Yeah. So it's like females and then younger people. So just as you get closer to 16, it gets worse. And then every age group, the females get it even worse, or it's more likely to be worse. Oh,
wow.
For the females. So yeah.
Did you get your second shot too?
I've not gotten any.
Oh.
Elizabeth is on the teacher list. So
So
she got ahead of it.
Oh man. So y'all were like, that's what I'm thinking. Is like maybe just like we know it's coming, so there's not going to be, because obviously so much of mine is like in my head. Like it's just our individual, not in my head, but like it's the way we emotionally react to it that makes us upset. And so I'm like, I just know this is coming. I know this is part of the world getting back to normal. And, hopefully the worst thing is sometimes those body aches are so bad that you can't sleep, like if you have a really bad flu, but I'm pretty shameless about the ibuprofen. So I'm hoping.
Yeah, it helped Elizabeth. She took a couple and it helped for a little bit.
Oh God.
But it was right to the hour of, whatever prescription it says. It's like, it runs out at 4.
And you feel it.
You feel it's like, oh, it's 4 hours and 2 minutes.
Yes. Daniel, when he first started teaching, he used to get really, really high fevers. Like I'm talking like we're maxing out both Tylenol and ibuprofen, and he's like 27 and he's got a 105-degree fever. Like all just barely, like we could have taken him to the hospital, like it was bad. And so I remember like one particularly bad illness he had where this went on for like 4 straight days. And it was just the two of us then. We didn't have kids. But you could set a watch by those meds wearing off. It was intense to watch. Okay, so I want to dive in. I'm really excited about this story.
Beautiful. Today, we shall be reading The Curious Story of Susan Styles, a psychical romance. Published in the Ludgate, March of 1893.
Basically, in this story, we have infanticide and ghosts. There's like, it's both a ghost story and the revelation of the ghost is about infanticide. And so I have so much to say about this idea. I thought I was going to start with the spiritualism and seance aspect of it, but I think I'm going to start with the baby death. All my students, they come out, if they take a few classes with me, it's like by the end of the semester, they can repeat word for word my intro to the Victorians lecture. And a huge part for me about understanding the Victorians is understanding their sexual norms. Victorians deeply believed that the purity of a mother and wife it's sort of, one of my students said it really well on Tuesday, actually, that it's like a scented candle and that radiates out and like influences the atmosphere. And there was this sort of idea about the Victorian mother and wife, that just them being morally pure would purify their family by proxy and make a strong British citizenry that could better essentially go and conquer more colonial lands. So it's like, it's this really weird, like nationalistic gender thing. And they called this the angel of the house. That's what they wanted women to be. Have I talked about that before?
Well, there have been many times where women have just been called angels in so many different aspects. And it's like that angel walking down the boulevard of the huge Victorian.
Oh, the Crystal Palace?
Crystal Palace. It was Crystal Palace.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
The guy was just throwing all sorts of niceties at women, and she's like angelic and
So, and I mean, you clearly have encountered this as we've been going through this project, but this is actually the way the Victorians themselves talked about it. This isn't like me coming in hot as a feminist professor and being like, blah, blah, blah. They wanted them to be the angel of the house. The term actually comes from a Victorian poem called The Angel of the House, written by a man named Coventry Patmore about his wife. And so they were really just, I mean, they didn't even like cook and clean like 1950s housewives would have. Like they had servants to do that in the middle and upper classes. And of course, this was very much like a class-based idea because, you know, somebody who's going to starve to death on the streets if they don't get a job cannot literally sit around doing nothing all day. And this is what, I mean, you can look at some of the Victorian craft work and domestic arts and see that literally, I mean, they weren't cooking, they weren't cleaning. They didn't really raise their own children generally. If a woman did, that was considered kind of unique. So they really did just like, they were not supposed to do much. And that was part of this angelic figure. And obviously somebody living in poverty doesn't have that option. But there's always class aspirations. And so although people of the working class and the servant class, which is kind of the same thing, couldn't have actually enacted this angel of the house role, they were still kind of expected to live up to it. Certainly not by staying home and doing nothing all day, but by embodying these values of female righteousness. And so where do I want to go next with this? To get a job, particularly in the serving industry, to be a servant, which is what Susan Stiles is in this story, which would have been considered way better of a job than working in a factory. Factories had all sorts of terrible hazards. Selling stuff on the street did too. A serving job was about the best you could do if you were in the lower classes. But to do that, like today, you had to have references. Unlike today, they called them a character. And that word alone explains for it's self-explanatory that they saw a perfect one-to-one relationship between your reputation and your moral character.
Oh, gotcha.
So the second you were seen as not an angel of the house, you were in danger of being classified as what the Victorians called a fallen woman, the opposite, which is a woman who had extramarital sex. And a woman who had extramarital sex, I mean, in fiction, they often, like, it's like authors don't really know what to do with these women, even when they're being sympathetic towards them. And generally, it's like kind of a stereotype that these women in fictional novels will throw themselves off bridges into rivers to kill themselves. But in reality, I mean, there was actually like a threat to one's livelihood. For instance, if you were a servant that got a reputation as being a fallen woman, you would never get a character again, a reference.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
So you would never be able to get those kind of serving jobs again. And as bad as being a servant might sound to us today, it definitely beat one of the common factory jobs for women at that time was working in matchstick factories, where due to your exposure to high levels of phosphorus all the time, they were at risk for a thing called phossy jaw that was essentially inevitable, from what I understand. Let's see.
Because, those match factories were just coated in phosphorus.
Look.
So it's just where your
jaw just
keeps
disintegrates.
Disintegrate.
But so, like, you know, you can kind of see the trail of logic where, like, you know, if this were you, that your reputation meant essentially the ability to not die in a factory.
Yeah.
And that is why this seemingly inexplicable act of killing her own baby, which certainly the middle and upper classes and everybody then would have looked on with horror, some of the most astute authors of the time did not excuse this, but tried to kind of redirect society and be like, but you created this problem.
Oh,
because
that's
this
cool.
woman was fearing for her life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she didn't know what to, and this is not like a super uncommon thing to find depicted in Victorian fiction, actually. George Eliot has a novel called Adam Bede where a woman kills her child for a similar reason. And in Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles, her child dies. So she does not kill it, but we also see the impact this has on her ability to economically survive after that and the kinds of jobs she can get. I know there's another one that I'm not thinking of right now, but it's kind of like when we talk about, like, what comes to mind is the Black Lives Matter protests in Minneapolis, particularly, where you guys are not. Are you in Minneapolis?
No, we're close.
Okay, so you can probably speak to this, but the way there would be some people that would be like, oh my God, they're damaging the buildings. And others of us would be like, okay, but like, can you understand how, like, that's a symptom?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter. It's not saying it's excusable or not. It's actually irrelevant to the question and a separate act.
Yeah.
But it is a symptom of how you've oppressed these people.
Yeah. The problem at hand is oppression. And
yes,
people speak out at a certain point. They react and they say, I can't take this anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and some people, like we said about evolution, some people have evolved to be the dominant, aggressive, I'm going to attack and fight back, and other people have just been loud, and other people have been the thinkers. And when you think, you organize, and then when you have enough people, you're going to have a couple people who are excited and aggressive, and then of course you also have the people who come in to add violence and everything. But that's again everything that's crazy.
Yeah. So, you know, we don't see Lucy Hardy in this story so much critiquing it the way other authors sometimes have, particularly because it's such a short, compact story.
It's very short.
But that is the cultural context to understand there, that this woman killed the baby to hide evidence of it so that she wouldn't be kicked out to the curb, unable to get employment and starve and die. Especially, you know, if she is in that situation with her baby, you know, he'll starve and die too.
Yeah.
And then, but we see in the story that happens to her anyway.
Mm-hmm.
All I really have to say about seances and spiritualism is that it was a huge deal back then. It might surprise some people to learn that the Victorians were into things like that, since they were so fussy and, you know, sort of fastidiously religious and proper, but they got really into talking with ghosts. It actually was a fad much more in the 1860s. But there were some really devoted followers, as we see in this story, even through the turn of the century. My favorite example is Arthur Conan Doyle was just obsessed with the belief that this was all real. He wrote a whole book later in his life, like a 300-page book.
Wow.
In trying to convince Victorian society that fairies were real.
Okay. Understandable. The Coming of the Fairies is the book?
Yeah, he wrote it. It's like a very long book about why we need to believe him that fairies are real. But he very much believed in spiritualism. We actually have video of him. I can link to the video because Arthur Conan Doyle lived until the 1930s, actually. So we have like lots of video of him talking about his investment in spiritualism.
Yeah.
But probably the best way to demonstrate that about him in a nutshell is he was actually really good friends with Harry Houdini.
Oh,
Houdini was sort of a myth-buster guy. Like, he did what he did because he wanted to prove to people that anybody can be fooled and that
right.
there's tricks for everything. But Conan Doyle, they were good friends for a while until Conan Doyle was just like insistent to Harry Houdini that he was really magical. And Houdini was like, no, don't you, like, have you been listening? Like, this whole thing is a shtick to like demonstrate to people that these things are not magical. And Conan Doyle was like, okay, fine. But I think maybe you just don't know that you're secretly magical. And like he kept coming for him, and like finally they like friend broke up because Houdini was like, I cannot take this dude. I'm not magical.
Wow.
Yeah. So these sorts of things were certainly alive and well at this time, if not quite as trendy as they had been in the mid-century.
Yeah.
I have more to cover on the periodical stuff.
Gotcha.
Welcome to the ad break on Victorian Periodical Parade. Here we're going to be discussing Anchor. Have you heard about Anchor? That is what we are using to host our podcast. It is the easiest way to make a podcast. It is free at the base level. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. Another beautiful and easy feature is that Anchor will distribute your podcast for you in such a way that it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and any other podcatcher that you are currently using. You can get paid for turning your hobby into a podcast, and there is no minimum listenership. Everything required to make a podcast is located on one simple website. And now, dear listeners, if you are interested in creating a podcast, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. You can further support us by clicking on the link in the feed below. Thank you, and enjoy listening to the Victorian Periodical Parade on Anchor Podcasts. Good day.
Yeah.
I have more to cover on the periodical stuff.
Gotcha. Just reading the story and then hearing the breakdown, there's so much in this story that, you know, I never knew about, and it's so insightful, and then there's so much background. So, yeah, it's awesome.
I love, like, I mean, I feel like so much of the show is just us doing this back and forth, but like, I love the way, like, learning little bits of history, like, those aren't even that in-depth, you know, things. It took like 10, 15 minutes, but like, you learn those little tidbits and you understand. It's like, I almost feel like the world of even a short story like that blossoms, and you see so many other layers of how these things, you know, made up the daily lives of people in this time, and how they, I don't know, I love it so much. Obviously, it's why we do this podcast.
Exactly. Oh, it's so great.
Okay, well, I am so excited actually to talk about the Ludgate, which is where the book says that this story was aired. Now, unfortunately, the exact 3 months in which this story was published.
Yep.
So this was in March 1893. I cannot find a copy of those exact issues anywhere. Like, even the best archives on the internet don't seem to have them. So that's kind of a bummer, but I did find a May 1893 episode.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So it seems to have been a pretty well-known paper, the Ludgate. I had not heard of it before, but it's big enough that it had a Wikipedia entry. And as I mentioned, it has university library websites where they'll link you to all the issues. So obviously it kind of...
Yeah, it has enough for now.
Than some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the first things I noticed about this journal in general, first of all, it's mostly fiction, and then it's got maybe like, it's monthly. So it's mostly stories, and then it has 1 or 2 articles. So this one is about a school. But the first thing that jumped out at me is that I've never in my life seen photograph quality in newspapers of this caliber.
Yeah.
And I even reached out to my friend who studies 19th century photography. He's a historian at Albion College. His name is Joseph Ho. And I mean, I'm sort of just beginning to dip my toes into the study of Victorian photography for a future book project I'm trying to work on. But he's, this is all his training, his bread and butter. And so I sent him these links and I was like, am I off my rocker? Like, am I just imagining that this is better than anything I've ever seen? And he agreed that this is really surprising quality, because although the Victorians had photograph quality of this kind, and I'm not sure most people really even sort of realize that they did actually have great photography. And by at least 1895, I'm not sure by 1893, they even had like snapshots, and you could take pictures of people jumping or bubbles or bugs. They had great photographs, but for mass production in newspapers and magazines, they didn't get, they didn't just like have a way to like put the picture in there. So usually what you see, even in the most famous like Jack the Ripper stuff, which is from 2 years earlier.
Isn't that drawn typically?
Yeah, you see wood engravings of the photos generally. And some of this probably depends. I mean, these are not based on photographs, but let's see. I want to find one that is. But yeah, they're generally what are wood engravings, where they have somebody make an etching of a photograph. So you can tell that these things were often done from a photograph.
Yeah.
Potentially, but they're drawings of that photograph. And I looked this part up because I was so curious about this. So this is something I'm just learning for this episode. But by the late 90s, they had a thing called halftone, which was a bit better. And from what I basically understand, they were making a different kind of print. Oh, yeah, it had to do with some sort of like acid washing that would acidify the lighter parts and leave the image.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, I'm not an expert.
Like clean it up.
And I think they're using the photograph, though. Halftone printing exposes a photograph onto a sensitized metal plate through a screen of tiny dots. The plate is then chemically processed as acid eats away at the areas which are light and leaves intact the areas which is dark. The result is a relief plate whose raised areas can be inked. Okay, so all that process is to make the model.
Yep, so that you can just make a bunch of newspapers with the same picture.
As you can see, like, even that, it's not a photograph. It doesn't appear like a photograph. No. You can tell that it's a print. And so I was just really shocked to see what basically look like actual Victorian photographs in this magazine. And my friend told me the technique that would have done it, and I will share that in a minute, but it still just really amazed me because, like, knowing the technique is one thing, but what I'm really focused on, why was no other newspaper doing this? Like,
must be the benefactor. Yeah. This specific newspaper must have a benefactor that loves photographs and was like, no, you're going to get this machine.
Yeah, well, and Joseph Ho mentioned, like, maybe it was a way to get an edge on the competition. I mean, I don't know. I did feel a little bit validated that he also had no clue, because I thought I would go to him and he'd be like, oh, no, Kari, like, there's plenty of magazines that have photographs
exactly
from this era. You just aren't aware of it. But, like, no, I actually did observe this, and nobody really is quite sure why the Ludgate had the corner on really good photography. Because, yeah, Joseph told me the technique, and then I was like, but Joseph, I can see the shine on this leather.
Wow.
That is not something that you see in these halftone images, like. And he didn't really have an explanation for why. He did say that it is this technique, rotogravure, engraving the image onto an image carrier.
Okay.
And engraved onto a cylinder. I didn't really understand it. He showed me the links, but it does look like, actually, this looks like the printing that we see today. So it looks like just a much more modern means of doing that. Okay. So that's the first thing I wanted to go over with the Ludgate. I was just, it's not, It is. I mean, it happens more than you would think that I stumble across something I've never seen before in Victorian studies because, there's endless things out there.
Right.
But it is always a delight when they surprise me.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
it's like feels like we've been married a long time, Victorian studies and I. And
Yeah.
I think, I always know how the conversation's going to go. And then sometimes I'm like, wow, like.
Delightfully surprised.
Yeah. So I was going to read just a bit about one of the articles in here is about spring cleaning, and it sounded really funny. So I was going to read just a little bit of it, but it's quite long. And I found another really delightful surprise at the end of this magazine, which is what I really want to get to. Whispers from the Woman's World by Florence Mary Gardiner. Morning rooms. How people who are fairly honest can ever speak of the delights of spring is past my understanding, especially if they think for a moment of the horror of horrors, spring cleaning, which is inevitably associated with this season of the year. Why, the very name is suggestive of topsy-turviness, muddle, and doing without everything which makes life worth living, and fills one with an inane desire to flee to the utmost ends of the earth where sweeps abide not and char women are unknown. Which of us during this domestic upheaval has not sat in chilly, fireless rooms because that particular quarter of the dwelling which we want to occupy has been subjected to the cleansing process and is still reeking with the odor of the special soap patronized by the presiding genius in command of the household forces? So you can see here what I was saying earlier, that like she's complaining about spring cleaning, not like you or I would because we're doing it.
Right.
Because it's like so inconvenient when the cleaner is there.
Yeah, and the smell left behind. So it's like you have to air it out for a day or two, and then you can go back to your favorite room.
Which is so hypocritical because it's that smell that they would have generally been like, cool, like you perfectly cleansed this room,
right.
Like I feel safe here. Yet it requires a certain amount of moral courage to encounter the black looks of the housemaid when she is timidly required to provide the means for retaining a normal temperature, and fireless grates in April and May are responsible for sentiments which can hardly be called philanthropic, and for utterances which breathe not resignation. Spring cleaning, however, is absolutely necessary, and like the other woes of life, must be borne with equanimity. Indeed, many of its inconveniences might be mitigated if average common sense were brought to bear upon the subject and method and management were the rule rather than the exception. And she goes on to like talking about a way to like manage your staff so that you don't have to get kicked out of your room. And I suppose this furniture here is like something she's recommending. And it's interesting because it goes on to talk about like fashions. Okay, so she has a subsection.
Yeah, cleaning and fashion.
Yep, and here's the hairstyles. So here's what I really wanted to get to. I'm excited.
So much excitement in this one.
I know. I was so excited to see this. Yeah, I really didn't think the Ludgate would really interest me. Look at these puzzles in a section called Puzzledom.
You scrolled down and I was like, what? That's cool.
I know, I didn't want you to see it, so I scrolled fast earlier, but it's so cool. And then look, just like we see in magazines today, answers to the old puzzles.
So what are these puzzles?
Okay, so why don't you describe what you see? I mean, we'll post the image, but this is an audio platform, so what do you see?
So there's a square with a dot in each corner and at each midpoint along the edges, and then there's 4 dots in a smaller square near the center.
Making like a square, yeah.
Yeah. So divide the above square into 4 equal parts, each part to be of the same shape, and each part to contain 3 dots.
I looked at it for 10 seconds and gave up. 4 equal parts. Maybe if you did it down each diagonal, that's 4 parts, because that would make 4 triangles.
I don't know how you get 3. I don't know how you get 4 parts with 3 dots in it.
We'll put this maybe up on the Insta when we air this episode so that people can try it. I am going to ask you all these riddles and look at the answers in the next issue. So that's why I stopped screen sharing.
Oh gosh, no.
I can now confirm that Whispers from the Woman's World is a standing column, and it is always by Florence Mary Gardiner.
Well, she got her money's worth then.
Mm-hmm.
Every edition.
Yeah, it was becoming actually in the 1890s one of the fields that was slightly more open to women. Like if you were middle class educated but didn't have money, you could do okay making a living. And there's a decent number of novels that you could do okay making a living as a regular correspondent journalist.
Oh, is that similar to columnist?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Probably a better word. There's a few novels that actually depict women doing that.
Yeah,
okay.
And movies too.
Let's see. Whoa, the answer to that visual puzzle is wild.
Yeah, I was thinking it's gonna be
wow.
Insane.
I would have never come up with that. Okay. Why is a nail fast in the wall like an old man? You're not going to get any of these because Victorian riddles are very odd. Like they're so weird. But the point is to make everybody laugh while you think it through. Go.
Because the more you pound on it, the more likely it's going to get bent, out of shape. If you hit it, it yells loudly.
You're thinking like a Victorian and naming really obscure things. I like it.
They're broad-headed, but skinny. Sharpened to the point.
Victorian. Ooh. Getting warmer, my friends.
Oh, darn it.
You have 12 seconds. You're good.
Yeah. They start out straight, but then I don't know.
Okay. Oh,
right. Okay. Yeah. So it's
so
just
bad.
a huge pun.
Yeah.
Basically technically
all
a Victorian
the jokes
pun.
all the jokes I ever see in magazines like this, they're all really bad puns.
Okay. Well, that'll help me with future riddles.
You're gonna get better. Okay. Ready?
Sure.
When does 2 and 2 make more than 4? Go.
When it's two couples having children. When does 2 and 2
make
4?
More than 4?
Right, make more than 4. 2 and 2. Gosh, that's weird. 2 and 2. So like to and fro. 2 and 2. 2. I don't know. I don't think ballerinas had anything to do with this.
7 seconds.
Yeah, 2 and 2. When you just keep saying 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2.
You got pretty close.
Darn it. Yep.
They're so annoying. Like you hear it and you're like, that is so cheesy and not even a very good riddle.
No, but I mean that's what my kids do all the time too. I think Philip was doing that, but he's not even 3 yet, so counting and adding is not in his world. So yeah, shoot.
Why is a joke like a chicken? Why is a joke like a chicken?
Joke like a chicken.
Even I don't get this one.
Sometimes the egg comes first. Sometimes the egg comes before the punchline. Joke like a chicken.
This is weird.
I
don't understand it.
Something about strangling it or plucking it or chicken. When you eat chicken for dinner, you have chicken at a dinner party, and you tell jokes at a dinner party. Yeah, it's gonna be super weird.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I had to look this up. I was so confused.
Oh, come on.
I know,
yes.
Like you couldn't.
What?
I know, Victorian riddles just always make me mad.
Well, but exactly, we're not living in their day and age, so we don't use as a word.
I know,
so
you couldn't have gotten that one.
No, good. All right.
Okay. What is it which the more it is cut, the longer it grows? What is it that which the more it is cut, the longer it grows?
Your hair?
Think about like construction.
More is cut. Let's see. So there's concrete and construction. Oh, the budget, the
Ooh, nice, but no.
money. The more is cut. The staff.
No, construction, dude.
Right. Ah.
Like things you actually make.
Oh, like a chair, or a ladder.
Or
What is cut? Just like a board. A building? No.
a
Gosh, darn it!
That's a pretty good one.
Oh, that one's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
The board is cut. Except, I mean, I wouldn't say you cut it.
Well, probably they did. That's
Right.
the lost in translation bit.
Right.
But maybe they did it just because it is confusing in the riddle. To
Yeah,
use
just enough to.
Yeah.
And again, it might be something about themselves where they're like, I'm going to make a riddle that you're not going to be able to get until I tell you it. Right? Do you think that's a part of their hubris?
I mean, I feel that when I look at them, but
Okay.
I am seeing here in the answers that it says the following are the names and addresses of the 5 winners in Puzzledom in the April issue, which is what we're doing, to whom the 3 volume novels have been sent. So, like, there were winners that got prizes. So I guess not.
Well,
this is why I love this. You have to use the context to understand. And, like, we're
Right.
all still learning Okay, this next one I'm really confused by.
Okay.
What am I? I am neither fish, flesh, nor fowl, yet I frequently stand on one leg. And if you behead me, I stand on 2 legs. Behead me again, and I stand on 4 legs. Oh my God, that's really hard. It's a decent riddle, because I know the answer.
So it's something that falls over every time you cut it in half. And then it just keeps going from like this, which is one straight line, to a triangle, and then you cut it in half, and now it's got. Does it go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4? 2 legs.
1 to 2 to 4 legs.
1 to 2 to 4.
Each time you behead it.
It's not a fork.
That was a surprisingly good guess.
Not a candle.
Oh, that's a good guess. Okay, I'm just going to tell you, this is hard, and to think somebody sat and got this correct. It is the word. That is really hard.
That is a riddle. That's good. That's
a riddle. You're right. Thank you, Victorians. You finally got it. That's a riddle.
I mean, but that's serious. That's really good.
That's hard. Somebody sat there and figured that out. Although I do wonder if you read these every month, if you would sort of learn that style, that they would mix media, and move out of like organic things into linguistics. And
right.
That is a good riddle.
Mm-hmm.
Man, and there were 5 winners. I have all their addresses. We can go visit their old homes.
Yeah, or at least the plot of land that they used to be, and now they're field.
They say my first is very bright, and what they say is true, but only in my second can my first be seen by you. My second would without my first be far from being bright. My whole is what the busy man welcomes with much delight. Okay, this one I don't even really get. And again, I know the answer.
Oh. Is it a clock? Sun, light, lasers. Sparks. Fire. Let's see. They say my first is very bright, and what they say is true. But only in my second can my first be seen by you. First is very bright. A blink.
Oh, it took me so long to even get it. while knowing the answer. Oh my God, that's a riddle. That's another one that's like really, really.
My second would be, would without my first be far from being bright. A mirror, a picture.
Look at the last though. My whole is what the busy man welcomes with much delight.
Well, that's why I said picture, you know, like a flash and stuff.
A busy man welcomes a picture?
Yeah. Like, you know, a person working at their desk looks at their picture on their desk.
We wouldn't have had that back then.
Drawing? Portraiture?
No.
No? Really?
What is a busy man welcome?
Ooh.
And look
riddles.
at the answers in the next issue.
Oh, gosh, no.
Those last two, it's like, those are like, you're right. Like, those are all the things that make up the best riddles, and they are hard.
And I was kind of something right. Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
And then I think if you had thought a little bit differently about the busy man.
Well, yeah, I was trying to hammer the small parts a little bit, and I think I left out the whole, which that one was confusing. It
took me a full 60 seconds to understand it with the answer. Like that just
Now the other hilarious thing is we gave me 40 seconds and these people had 30 days.
By the 20th of May. Okay. So they had 20. Yeah, they had 20 days and no TV, you know. So they're just
right.
But I also
they're
feel this is the kind of thing that I would do, or I do sometimes do, if I can't sleep at night.
Yeah.
I'll do a crossword, and then if there's one thing that's just stumping me, I'll just run through it in my mind while I'm trying to fall asleep and see what word I think.
Yeah.
I could see if you went to bed on one of these and you just really chewed on it, eventually in 3 weeks, you might figure it out. Right. So yeah, that's true. Oh man. Okay. This was so fun. I'm glad I did it. I about quadrupled my water intake. So thank you.
Nice.
And I feel better. Did you notice I perked up? Water.
I knew, well, and also I knew that every time you said you were excited, you were actually excited. So that puts the dopamine and serotonin in your body. And it's everything's better now because I want to do this.
I know. I do really want to do it. I'm sorry that.
No. But I mean, when you are down, if there's something that you are excited about when you saw it, when you come back to it, you're excited again because you're like, ooh, I get to share this with somebody else. And then also, the whole spiral of, well, hopefully I can share this with a ton of people because this is hilarious and people should enjoy this too.
Okay, awesome.
Sweet.
All right. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Victorian Periodical Parade.
That was the second half of episode 2, where Dr. Kari Nixon analyzes and breaks down this story for the modern-day listener. Produced for the Victorian Periodical Parade, Season 3, Episode 2. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to check in to The Curious Story of Susan Styles, a psychical romance, published in the Ludgate, March 1893. Written by Catherine Lord. Edited by Johnny Maines. Narrated by Owen Curtis. Leave your comments and reviews on podchaser.com at the Victorian Periodical Parade or on Facebook /Victorian Parade. Thanks. Have a great day.
Victorian Periodical Parade.